Howdy folks, and welcome to the Hillbilly Kitchen. Today we're going to be making a traditional pumpkin pie. Now, no Thanksgiving dinner would be complete without a pumpkin pie. And it's pretty simple to make. You want to turn your oven on 425 before you start mixing it up, because you do want a really hot oven to start this in. You turn it down after 15 minutes. Start it at 425, and that takes a minute. But this is another custard pie, and those custard pies you have to start in a hot oven. You have to have a pie shell, and this is a homemade pie shell. We have a video up for that. And if you're doing homemade pie shells, you do want to put your pie shell back in the refrigerator after you roll it out to make sure it's really cold before you add your filling to it. It kind of helps keep your crust from getting soggy. And you don't prick your crust with this pie either. Okay, you have to have 2 eggs, which I've got in my bowl here already, and that's what you want to start with. And you want to whip those up a little bit. In a custard pie, what makes your pie rise is actually the eggs. And it's not going to rise very much, but it's also what thickens your pie. So you have to make sure you get a custard pie really done, or it'll be runny. And you want a can, this is a 15-ounce can of pumpkin. I'm not partial to any particular brand, but I left this in the can because I wanted to show you want to check the ingredients. Nowadays, about half of the canned pumpkin in stores is not actually pumpkin, it's squash. I'm sure a squash pie is tasty, but I want to make a pumpkin pie, I want pumpkin in it. So check the ingredients and make sure it says pumpkin, not pumpkin and squash, or just plain squash. And you just add that into your eggs. You can certainly use fresh pumpkin for this if you have it too. But if you're cooking with fresh pumpkin, you're probably using your granny's recipe and you don't want mine anyway. Okay. And you need a whole 12-ounce can of evaporated milk. Not condensed, evaporated milk. And we're just going to put that in there. I'm going to stir that up just a tiny bit. Now, most pumpkin pie recipes call for 3/4 cup of regular granulated sugar. But years ago, when my mom and I were making pumpkin pies for Thanksgiving, my mom made one of her famous mistakes that turned out to be a pretty good mistake. She accidentally used brown sugar instead of regular white sugar. And the pie was so much tastier. It was just richer. It was a little bit darker, but it just seemed like it made it, the texture was better. So ever since, I have been using brown sugar. And if you pack it, if you want an exact measurement, it's 3/4 cup of packed brown sugar. But if you just fill your 1 cup measuring cup up, that comes out to about 3/4 cup, and it makes it a little easier to mix if you don't pack it. So dump in your sugar. Not all mistakes when you're cooking turn out to be mistakes. And certainly using the brown sugar in the pumpkin pie was not such a mistake. It was actually an improvement in a very old recipe. You need a half a teaspoon of salt, a teaspoon of cinnamon, and I do kind of heap up my teaspoon of cinnamon a little bit. I just like a little extra in there, but that's entirely up to you. And you can adjust these spices to suit your taste. I've got half a teaspoon of ginger, I went to Thanksgiving somewhere a couple of years ago, well, it was a Thanksgiving dinner, it wasn't on Thanksgiving Day, and the only pumpkin pie that was there was one that somebody had bought at a deli, and I swear they didn't put any spices in that. I have a half a teaspoon of a quarter teaspoon of nutmeg. And then I have about 1/8 of a teaspoon of cloves. And the cloves are pretty strong, so you do want to be careful with them. You don't want them overpowering your pie. But it's just that simple to mix it up. You want to make sure you get your spices all mixed in there pretty good. You don't need to drag out mixers or anything like that. Just a simple whisk will mix it up. There's no lumps. And you pour it in your pie shell. And it's going to fill your pie shell all the way up. Now, I usually make at least 3 or 4 of these on Thanksgiving. And it is a good idea to stick a cookie sheet in your oven under them, because sometimes they do bubble over a little bit. Especially, I think, if you're using a pre-made pie shell, they tend to be a tiny bit smaller, even the deep dish ones. So you want to put your cookie sheet under it. But that's all there is to mixing it. We're going to put it in our oven at 425 for 15 minutes. Then we're going to turn it down to 350, and we're going to bake it at least another 40 minutes, maybe longer. So we'll be back to show you what it looks like when it's done. My pumpkin pie has been in the oven for about 1 hour and 5 minutes now. It was in there for 15 minutes at 450, and then I turned it down to 350, and it was in there for another 50 minutes, maybe just a little bit longer. It is done. Now, there's several ways that you can tell it's done. One is that it doesn't jiggle. If you touch it and it starts to jiggle and acts like it's still liquidy, it's definitely not done. It's a nice golden brown color. And this pie is actually a little bit darker than most pumpkin pies would be because we use the brown sugar in it. There's some tiny cracks around the edge. And it has risen up quite a bit, which means it's going to be a really good pie. Now, as it cools, this pie will settle back down just a little bit, but that's nothing to worry about. It's perfectly normal. See, it's already starting to settle and get some wrinkles right here. If you get a big hole in the middle as it cools, your pie didn't get done. And if you're taking this to a dinner or something, you may want to bake another pie. And pumpkin pies are a really good pie to take to a dinner if you're going to somebody else's house, because they're super easy to transport. I mean, you just cover it with a little saran wrap or a little aluminum foil or whatever, and you can take it. But you want to cool this, completely cool it, for about 2 hours before you cut it. It is a custard pie, and as it cools, it will thicken. You want to try not to jar it a whole lot, because again, that'll make it sink too much. Let it sit still and cool. And most people serve this with a little whipped topping on it. Not everybody likes the whipped topping, so I wouldn't put it on. I would serve it beside it. And if you make a homemade pumpkin pie this Thanksgiving, for goodness sakes, don't defile it with that artificial Cool Whip stuff. Whip you up some fresh whipped cream and top it with that. The flavor is so much better. It's better for you. And you know, you made the homemade pie, so don't put that artificial stuff on it. But I hope you really enjoy these homemade pies this Thanksgiving, and especially pumpkin pie. Like I said, it just wouldn't be Thanksgiving without pumpkin pie. When the kids were little, I used to make 6 pumpkin pies at least on Thanksgiving. And one of our traditions was, because I baked the pies the day before Thanksgiving, is you got to have pumpkin pie for breakfast on Thanksgiving morning, because I was cooking turkey and stuff in the oven and there wasn't time or room in the kitchen to make breakfast. So everybody looked forward to breakfast on Thanksgiving morning because you got to have pie. And we really appreciate you joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. And we hope you all have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Thanks for joining us in the Hillbilly Kitchen. And don't forget to click like and subscribe. We'll see you next time.